Stephen Moore is a White House Economic Recovery Task Force member working directly with Donald Trump. And it is great to have you back and good to see you again, Stephen. How are you?
Super. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So let's get straight into it. Right now, we are just a few weeks, less than a couple of months now outside of the election. And we are seeing that obviously the economy is playing a major role in this election. Democrats have voiced their opposition to President Trump's payroll tax holiday ever since he signed the executive order doing so. You talk about this because you say that, well, there may be a little bit of shenanigans with the approach that the Democrats are taking here. What were you referring to?
Well, I've been a big advocate of this idea of rolling back the payroll tax for workers in this time of economic crisis. It's the best way, in my opinion, to stimulate the economy. But more importantly, it's Donald Trump's favorite idea. And so I've talked to him many times about this, and he's a big fan of it. And so he came up with this idea of suspending payroll taxes through the rest of the year. And Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi and many leading Democratic economists and Chuck Schumer, the leaders of the Democratic Party, have really denounced this and said, oh, this is a gimmick and it's not going to work and it's going to hurt Social Security. And the irony of this is we found all of these old tapes because about 10 years ago when Barack Obama was president, he put in place a payroll tax cut. Back then, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They were, oh, this is the greatest thing ever for the economy. It's going to help 150 million workers and it's needed money in their pockets. And we don't have to worry about the impact on Social Security. But of course, now that Trump is doing it, they're saying exactly 100% the opposite. And, that's called a double standard. And obviously it makes them look silly.
Some would say that a payroll tax holiday is something that could be definitely useful to workers. Some others are saying that it's just negligible. It won't make a huge bit of difference, but it will impact the government. What do you say to that? And also to the fact that federal borrowing amid the pandemic has put us on path to exceed World War II. I think it's 98% of the fiscal year. We're looking as far as what servicing the debt is going to require for all of us.
Well, look, this is the price we pay for the worst mistake in the history of the United States, or one of the top five, in my opinion, which was shutting down our economy back in March and April and not dealing with this virus in a very smart way, especially states like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and my home state of Illinois that shut down their economies, but then they didn't do the most important thing, which was keep their seniors safe and had high death rates even as they killed their businesses and threw millions of people in unemployment lines. So look, if you don't have people working, you don't have businesses functioning, guess what? You're going to have a massive increase in your debt. And now people say, oh my gosh, especially a lot of the politicians say, where did this big debt come from? And what did they think was going to happen? It is, it's an ugly number. I'm not sugarcoating this. I mean, we should never, one of the lessons of this is never, 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 never again should we shut down our economy. And by the way, Joe Biden just said last week, if the scientists told him to, and the bunch of liberal scientists surround him, he would shut down the economy again. And then you'd see the debt go through the roof. Incidentally, as we speak, those numbers that you talked about are accurate, from the amount of the debt that we're talking about. That does not include the $3 trillion that Nancy Pelosi wants to spend on top of the $3 trillion we've already spent, on top of the $5 trillion that we appropriated at the beginning of the year. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. It's like, they're passing around money like it's candy. And so if that bill were to pass, I estimate for the first time in American history, government spending would approach 50% of our GDP. That means we'd be more socialist than free market.
Okay, so we're almost barreling towards, I think it's $27 trillion right now, and that's before the $3 trillion, $2 trillion, whatever it may be. I think the Federal Reserve has their own balance as well. So what does that look like? The trajectory, look down the road a couple, 3 years. What does that look like? Are you going to have to implement austerity measures? Do taxes go through the roof? What happens?
I don't know. We've never really done this before. I don't think you can get out of this crisis, obviously, by raising taxes. That just slows down the economy. So I think it's going to require cuts in government spending, some rapid reductions in government spending. But I think it'll also require growth. We got to get this economy growing. We got to have people back on the job. We got, one of the things that really worries me right now more than anything is I saw some statistics the other day that 1 out of 3 small businesses is in financial distress.
Yeah.
1 out of 3. well, even if only 1/3 of those companies, fail, you're talking about millions and millions of business bankruptcies and tens of millions of lost jobs. So look, we got a big rebuilding job to do here. There's no question about it. And my problem is I look at Joe Biden's plan, and his rebuilding plan is basically raise taxes. So I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get the economy moving if we raise the capital gains tax, the corporate tax, the small business tax, the payroll tax. All of these things, I think, takes a lot of juice out of the economy.
Stephen, you're absolutely correct on the small business economy. And this is something that I've been focused on most of my professional life. And this is a question for you because outside of the mainstream media, the mainstream news is not talking about small business. They're talking about the election, they're talking about COVID. But the fact of the matter is that when you have the Independent Restaurant Association of America suggest that 80% of small restaurants, not franchises, but independent restaurants are going to be closing, and you're seeing retail and commercial real estate defaults going through the roof and strip malls and the gutting of our inner cities. What is the White House looking to do? I know PPP, the Payment Protection Program, helped offset some of the pain, but wasn't that just kicking the can down the road for the pain? And once that stimulus ends, most of those small businesses go away?
Hopefully not. I mean, that would be the doom and gloom scenario. But hopefully in the next few months, we're going to start to see, people. And by the way, this is already happening. People are going to stores now. They're going to restaurants more. I think some of those statistics that you're talking about. Look, I'm very concerned about it. I'm not denying anything you're saying, but there were some reports just today that department sales are starting to show some increases. Those are the kind of stores we're all worried about going bankrupt. You're right about the small businesses. I mean, here's one of my big frustrations, by the way, and you as a small business advocate, I think, can attest to this, that there was a real unfairness to what we did in April, May, and June, where we basically said, oh, well, Walmart can stay open, Home Depot can stay open, Target can stay open, the big box retailers, but not the hardware store down the street or the little deli so that's why it's the most amazing thing, Walmart had its biggest year ever. Look at Amazon, it did unbelievable. Apple's a $2 trillion company. So we kind of subsidize the big massive companies and let them play by separate rules. And the heartbeat of America on Main Street all over the country is the little small businesses that you're talking about. They didn't get the help, and they actually played under different rules. Tell me, why is it that it's safer to go into a Walmart than to go into a hardware store? I mean, I don't even understand the logic of that.
So a lot of that can be addressed because of the fact that we have a 10th Amendment, we have federalism, and those rules were implemented by governors and mayors locally. And this is not maybe a federal issue. So from a federal standpoint, as you're trying to offset this doom and gloom, which many people, economists, are suggesting is a tsunami that's heading towards the shore, maybe once we get past the election, it's going to hit. I don't know. But how do you, from a federal standpoint, try to implement policies when they may or may not be implemented through state or local governments?
Well, I was one of the biggest advocates at the start, and our group really had a big impact in doing. I think Trump took the right approach in terms of saying, look, we believe in federalism. We believe in giving the power to the states and letting states learn from each other. So we did do that. We said, look, this is up to the governors to decide, for their states what they think the best policies are. And there was a wide range of policies. I mean, you had New York and Connecticut and New Jersey and Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania that basically just shut down their economies. But, there were a lot of states like Iowa and Nebraska and Utah and South Dakota and others that didn't even shut down at all. And big surprise that what we found, I mean, there is a learning lesson here, that the states that had the most severe lockdowns, not only did they kill their businesses, they also had the highest death rates, because it actually turned out keeping people shut in their homes with 5 or 6 people indoors wasn't a very smart idea. So, I think it's a tragedy what we did. I am a little bit more optimistic, I think, than you are, that so far over the last 3 or 4 months, we've actually had a pretty good V-shaped recovery. Now, Whether we can continue with that, it's tough to know. I mean, you're right. There are a lot of danger sides ahead. But I'll tell you this. I mean, I think a lot really does depend on this election. Obviously, I worked for Donald Trump. I was a senior economist during the last campaign, and I'm on his economic recovery task force. I think it makes a big difference. I mean, I think if you had a really hobbled economy and you elected Joe Biden with the agenda that he's put on the table, I do think we'd be in serious danger of a Great Depression.
So what does it mean for the small business owner across the country? We've got 32 million small businesses across the country. They employ 67% of all people that are employed in this country. So they are, in essence, the lifeblood of the economy. What are the two choices that this election is going to be giving, and what results would we see with either of both President Trump or Joe Biden winning?
So, that's a great question. And when I knew that things were going to be good, when Trump was elected, when I saw literally 72 hours after that election, which caught everybody by surprise. Everybody thought that Hillary was going to win, and Trump pulled out that amazing upset. Someday, look at the map. Look what happened to small business optimism. Within 72 hours of the election of Trump, small business optimism just went straight up. It never happened before in 50 years. It just went to an all-time high. And it had been very low during most of the Obama presidency. And the reason I mention that is, boy, what happens if all of a sudden we replace Trump with Biden? I think you're going to see a cratering of small business confidence. Because they're facing higher taxes, higher regulations, just more of an anti-business party that will force unions. Look what's happened in California, where they're trying to shut down Uber operators and Lyft operators. The gig economy is in a lot of trouble. So this is a highly consequential election. I mean, there's very few things that the Democrats are in favor of that would actually help the economy grow or that would help small business.
The regulatory state has been something that Donald Trump attacked right out of the gate. And, his rule was for every new regulation, he would decrease it by 3 or 4. It actually turned out a statistical analysis showing for every new rule, he actually removed 20, 21, 22, I think the number was. It is an incredible reduction of regulations. But as you just correctly stated, you were referring to the California Assembly bill that passed. It's called AB5, that limits the gig workers. You can have, journalists can no longer freelance for a certain number. You can't drive an Uber or DoorDash or whatever it is until you're employed by union companies. Is that something that you would see that would be oozing across other states across the country, and more, Democrat or liberal state assemblies passing?
Yeah, sure. And it would kill the, I was just actually out in California. There's been a stay on that ruling right now. So that, I used Uber all the time, many times while I was out there. And I'd asked the drivers, because this is supposed to benefit the drivers, right? And they're afraid of this. They think this is going to, destroy their jobs and the company that they work for, and that Uber and Lyft will just move out. And think about this. I mean, who are the people who would be hurt the most if Uber and Lyft and other, ride sharing services leave? Well, it's going to hurt, number one, the drivers, the people, and those are hundreds of thousands of jobs of people who do that for a living. But also it'll hurt the lowest income people, because Uber and Lyft and other things are relatively inexpensive ways. These people can't rent a limousine, right? And so it hurts. This is the problem with liberalism. Oftentimes these policies hurt the very low income people that they say they care most about.
President Donald Trump, obviously well known for his real estate investments over the years. It's how he's made so much of his money. We are seeing right now folks like Sam Zell, institutional investor, the man's worth $5 billion. He's got his finger in a lot of different industries, commercial real estate being one of them. And he has called, and many others are saying, what we're about to see right now with the commercial real estate defaults that are going to be occurring is a Detroitification of inner cities, which is incredibly scary when you think about it. And the reason being is when you have major large companies, Stephen, that no longer need 30, 40, 50% of their employees to get in their car or their subway or train and drive in every single day, you no longer need that office space. And the restaurants and dry cleaners and bars that support those employees coming into the city are no longer going to survive either. What is Donald Trump doing? Is he aware of this impending prediction of doom? And is there anything that the government can do to offset it?
Got to get the economy open, and it's that simple. You got to get people back, let businesses open up, let people go back to the office. Do obviously.
But what about this change though of no, you know, everybody's
Look, I
Zooming
get that. I'm
today.
just saying the single most important thing to try to alleviate that is to stop closing businesses down. I mean, there's no need to do that. Now, I take your point. I agree with Sam Zell and you that this is going to be a brutal period for commercial real estate. There's no question about it. This is a new America. I've been working at home myself for the last 4 or 5 months. I've been in the office, 1 day a week, and there's nobody downtown in Washington, D.C. It's a ghost town. Chicago's the same way. New York. Cities are in for a brutal period right now, no question about it. But not just office space in cities, even in the suburbs. I have a friend who owns a $5 million office building in outside of in the suburbs in Chicago, and he said the rental payments are probably going to fall by half. Well, he's going to have a hard time making his mortgage and things like that. So yeah, there's going to be real pain and suffering, a real adjustment in our economy. Meanwhile, by the way, I live in, as I said, I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. The real estate market here is just going gangbusters for housing, for residential. And why is that? Why do you think that is? Because people are leaving Washington, D.C. Why are they leaving Washington, D.C.? Because these imbecile politicians don't do the most important function of government, which is to keep people safe. I mean, too many of these mayors and governors are siding with the criminals. I saw the other day that, Kamala Harris, she's the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats. She called the protesters and rioters social justice warriors as they rape and pillage these businesses. And these are small immigrant businesses that are being, burned to the ground, or where they're coming in and taking everything out and looting. I mean, you just can't. There are repercussions to that. We saw that, by the way, in the 1960s, where the same kind of rioting happened. And it took 10 years for cities to come back from that. And the studies all show, I've been reading a lot of the economic literature about what happened when these mayors allowed the rioting to go on. The people who were hurt the most were the low-income neighborhoods, because their property values declined. So if they're a mayor or governor, listen to this, restore civil order. You've got to. That's the core of being a community.
I agree with you 100%. And what you're seeing right now in the suburbs of DC, you're seeing in Westchester and Long Island for New York. You're seeing it outside of San Francisco and Los Angeles as well. So, water always finds its own level, but the carnage that it's going to be leaving behind is something that is really concerning to me. And I'm not sure if there is a government solution to that. Is there?
Except, the government has to do its job of keeping, people safe. You can't, you can't have the people, going into stores and just stealing everything and, breaking the windows. And, most of the stores, I was in Manhattan not long ago, it was heartbreaking. All the stores are boarded up, and they're boarded up, not A, because they're some are closed, but B, they're boarded up because they're worried that the looters are going to come in and shatter all the windows and so on. So, look, this is a tough period, but I do think Trump needs to get, he did something very controversial. He said, look, if these cities aren't going to take care of themselves, why should we spend more federal money on them? And it was a controversial thing to say. I haven't made my mind up about it, but it's a provocative idea. Look, these mayors have to, before they come rushing for federal aid, they've got to take the steps to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Last real quick question for you, because I know you got to go. We are about 60 days out from this election. You are inside the White House as an Economic Recovery Task Force member. You've worked with Donald Trump throughout his administration. How is the feeling right now as we head into this election? Optimistic, concerned? Where are you?
Oh, it's changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The conventions really were, I think, a turning point. Democrats refused to talk. They had a whole 4-day convention. They never talked about the violence in the cities.
Yeah.
Not once. This is the number one issue that people are worried about. And all they talked about is the social justice warriors and income inequality and racism in America, and not talking about keeping people safe. And so Trump has gone from being a big underdog to a slight favorite right now. And so now he's down in the polls, but the betting market has Trump right now as a slight favorite. So it's going to be a jump ball election. We'll see what happens. But as long as Democrats continue to defend the rioters, I think they're in big trouble. And also, I think people are worried about how left wing their economic agenda is. What Trump needs if he's going to win, it's very simple. He needs people who don't like him to vote for him. Because Trump, 54% of Americans do not like Donald Trump. They don't like the way he acts. They don't like his behavior. I like him, but the majority of Americans don't. But he has to get people who don't like him personally to say, I may not like the guy, but I like what he does for the economy. I care a lot about my kids and my family and my finances. And in the end, I think, hopefully that'll happen. But the other quick thing is, the biggest factor, of course, is the virus itself. If the virus is under control, and by the way, right now, all the signs are extremely positive in that regard. You won't read that in the newspapers because they only talk about it when it's going up, not when it's going down. But if we have the virus under control, I think Trump will win as well. But we might see a second outbreak, and that makes things, a lot dicier.
You might see a second outbreak, and there's also the question about mail-in balloting as well. And I know Bloomberg and
I'm not an expert on that one, but I'm worried about it.
Yeah. The White House Economic Recovery Task Force member, Stephen Moore, greatly appreciate you taking the time to spend with me, and we'll see you down the road. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.